When I return from abroad every other year, I am impressed with the wealth of Japan. Especially, I get this impression from the young people of Japan. In the first place, they wear nice clothes in fashion instead of wearing jeans with holes in the knees and worn-out t-shirts. It appears to me that their handbags and watches are no less expensive than those of adults. In Japan, there is a market for young people. It is not limited to clothing only. It also applies to leisure activities. It is not too much to say that even the universities are markets for young people. What country in the West is able to do business with only young people in view as consumers? Most of the young people in the West are barely making both ends meet. At the age of 18, they live apart from their parents and stand on their own feet. Not a few students work their way through college. They must earn money for bread to live on. For them, such things as skiing in the Alps and wearing fashionable clothes are out of the question. Those who have side jobs are the lucky ones, for most young people are out of work. If Japanese parents were to stop giving money to their children, what would become of them? No doubt some people are lucky enough to have a good sense of direction by birth. But I am poor at sensing direction, and even though I must have visited a place time after time, I get lost on my way to the place. When I was a teenager, I was so shy that I couldn't ask the way and used to wander in circles and hope that some miraculous chance would bring me to the spot I was heading for. I am no longer too embarrassed to ask people for directions, but I often receive very confusing replies. Therefore, after having asked for directions, I regret doing so now and then. If anyone ever asks me the way somewhere, I always tell them that I am not familiar with this area in order to avoid confusing them, but even this can have embarrassing results. When I was once on my way to work, I was stopped by a man who asked me if I would direct him to the Sunlight Building. I replied as usual, but soon I realized that he had asked for the way to my office building. At this point, I tried turning back in search of him, but it was too late.
Some people complain of being short of time, others are always looking for ways to kill time. Often time problems come about in an external situation. In our work there is nothing for it but to make appointments and fill in schedules. But time problems are based on our fears and desires as well. We are always falling into traps of our own setting, when we have scheduled too many things in advance. Why do people in a doctor's waiting room or at the beauty salon reach for a magazine at once? Why does waiting get on their nerves, even if they have plenty of time? Why can't they enjoy themselves at leisure to their heart's content with nothing to do? We are afraid of doing nothing because it might make us think about ourselves. So any kind of activity supplies us with the excuse that we are too busy to deal with our own problems.
In those days, people who were not very well off would get a travel agency to put them in touch with other people who had cars and were going in the same direction, so that they could share the expenses. I had decided to go to Mexico around June with what little money I had, and the agency introduced a strange honeymoon couple to me. The bridegroom was a young Mexican who had gotten married to a blonde lady soon after meeting her. He was going to take her home to meet his parents in Mexico City in June, when I was in anxiety about my job. The young husband didn't think me an ideal traveling companion, but the bride did. The couple hardly spoke the same language, so in the course of time, the lady began to turn to me as her advisor. On the long way south, she would often call on me in my motel room to discuss their misunderstandings. During the journey, she didn't seem to be on good terms with him. As for me, however, the role as the lady's advisor seemed to be working out. I never saw this couple or heard from them after I parted from them in Mexico, but some years later the bride sent me a postcard referring to the wonderful journey we had had together, which also reminded me of many things. Today I'm far from sure that she is happy with her husband, but I wish the couple good luck all the same.
When we reflect on the global situations of today, even for a while, we surely see that our planet is now in danger. Tropical rainforests are being destroyed in the name of development, and in addition, acid rain is doing serious damage to forests all over the world. People in Africa, Brazil and Indonesia are cutting down their forests to export lumber. Rare plants and animals are in danger of dying out because they have lost their habitats. Grasslands are turning into deserts due to overgrazing, and soil is becoming less productive on account of long exposure to the sun and wind. Now we are also faced by other environmental problems, such as air pollution. It is only too clear that human activities are responsible for these phenomena. It is our duty to make every possible effort to protect the global environment. The human race has availed itself of the environment and destroyed it on a large scale. There is no doubt that environmental destruction is a matter of life and death for all creatures on the earth. Therefore, we can't be too careful in avoiding development that interferes with the balance of ecosystems.
How many coffee shops are there in Japan? I doubt if anyone has taken the trouble to count all the Kissiten throughout the country, but the total number must be very large. Japanese people take coffee shops for granted. Tourists, however, are very impressed with the large number of coffee shops. I live in a large city and the nearest coffee shop is within reach. Believe it or not, there are dozens of coffee shops within a 2-kilometer area of my house. Why are there so many Kissiten? Is coffee, most of all, to their taste? Are they famous for being the world's greatest coffee drinkers, and do they take more pleasure in drinking coffee than any other people in the world? No, I don't think so. The answer is connected with living conditions rather than with drinking habits. I remember reading a British newspaper which said the average Japanese lives in a rabbit hutch. Of course, the newspaper was not saying that Japanese homes were dirty. It was referring to their size. In other words, Japanese homes are quite small on the average in comparison with British houses. Therefore, I think the Japanese substitute Kissiten for the living room. Some people make use of Kissiten on business. Why don't you try your luck and drop in at one of these coffee shops in Japan?
One thing that Japan and the US face in common is an aging population. This is because of falling birth rates and better medical care. The aged in Japan now make up about 11% of the population, but this figure will rise to 25% by the year 2025, 7 percentage points higher than in the US. To care for the aged, both Japan and America will have to deal with higher costs for health care and pensions. This will be a burden on younger workers with respect to taxes and so forth. Japan will be shorter of labor than the US, for America takes in a large number of immigrants each year. Japan may also be compelled to accept plenty of foreign workers. As Japan becomes an aging society, it will have to make new choices. Will Japan move in the direction of a European-style welfare country? Who is it that will look after the aged? Who in the world will be in charge of the hospitals and nursing homes for the aged? As for healthcare and pensions, Japan now spends about 41% of its national income on them. Some economists say that this figure will amount to 60% or higher by the year 2020. This will do serious damage to the nation's economy. Above all, it will put pressure on the private savings which were used in the past for economic investment.
When young, we are in good health and free from care, but we have little experience of the world to act on, and we know almost nothing. As the saying goes, ignorance is bliss. When we are old, we know more about life. However, we no longer have the energy to make use of that knowledge to the full, and can't take a chance to do anything. In youth, we are full of hopes and ideals. In old age, we have learned by bitter experience that all our efforts, no matter how successful they may be, are in the end meaningless. Death is the only reality. We have a proverb in regard to this process of being born, growing up and reaching a ripe old age: if youth only knew, if age only could. This proverb points out the two essential weaknesses of our human condition. In youth, we are ignorant of the world, and in old age, we are short of the physical strength to put all our knowledge to use. This is the sad irony of human existence. Life doesn't always consist of only pain and bitter disillusion. If it did, life would not be worth living. We learn wisdom from our errors. It is only by making mistakes that we can really know how to live correctly.
When it comes to a sense of humor, we are inclined to associate the phrase with Englishmen all the time, though not all Englishmen are gifted with a sense of humor in reality. Like a sense of humor, sportsmanship is an English ideal, though not all Englishmen live up to it. Not a few modern sports are derived from British invention. For example, boxing, rugby, soccer, hockey, tennis, and so on originated in Britain and were given rules by the British. Sport rests on rules, and sportsmanship is based on the ability to practice a sport in obedience to its rules. The ideal of sportsmanship goes so far as to be applied to life in practice. This accounts for the fact that a lot of sporting terms are used in ordinary speech. To take boxing alone, a wise and impressive criticism is said to be straight from the shoulder, while an unfair one is said to hit below the belt. One of the most important rules of life is never hit a man when he's down. In other words, never take advantage of another's misfortune or attack a person who has given way.
Many people are concerned about what television has done to the generation of American children who have grown up watching it. For one thing, TV deprives children of creative imagination. Some teachers feel that television has taken away the child's ability to form mental pictures in his own mind, resulting in children who cannot figure out a simple story without visual illustrations. For another, too much TV too early tends to cause children to turn away from real life. As a result, they grow up to be passive spectators who can only respond to action, but not take the initiative in doing anything. Another area for concern is that children are short of tolerance for learning. They don't know what to do with some problems if it takes them too long to solve them, because they have been conditioned to see all problems solved in 30 or 60 minutes on TV. Television violence in particular has the most serious impact on children, most of whom get used to it and become incapable of sympathizing with the pains of others.